It was built in the 1920s. There was an advertisement in Oklahoman raising money for this building for a series of small shops downstairs and fraternal lodges upstairs. That was the pitch the developers made to raise money for the property. They built the building. Fairly quickly, Hills Business College moved in upstairs, and they were the primary occupant of the upstairs space for several decades. And they were one of the anchors of the building. It did house a series of small businesses throughout the decades. The First Baptist Church bought the building in the early 30s and utilized part of the building, continued to utilize more and more of the building. And they operated here until the early 2000s when they finally closed and sold the building. The church used it as they combined several of the bays and used it as a sanctuary. And just a church that had, I assume, services on Wednesday and Sunday. They started operating a food soup kitchen out of the building to service the local indigent populations. I think they also did some other outreach services through the property. So much of the character is still intact in this building. There was a quote modernization done to part of the front facade by the Baptist Church when they did a modernization in the 50s or 60s, changing around a little bit of the storefront configuration. But by and large, the building is intact and as it was built in 1920. Lots of large windows, the brick detailing is beautiful, and it's just not had to change that much since the 1920s. We bought the building in January of this year, is when we closed on the property. I've been involved in the Film Row area just a block to the south for almost a decade and had admired this building for a very long time. It's one of the anchors of Main Street. And it's one of those buildings that really harken back to an earlier era of Oklahoma City. Getting the building listed on the National Register of Historic Places is critical to making the numbers pencil out. The tax credits that allows us to use are critical. So we started the process immediately, hired a historian to write the draft nomination to get the building listed on the National Register and recognize its significance to the Oklahoma City urban fabric. Our intent is to restore the ground floor to what it looked like originally with that series of small shops. The storefront was a very dominant feature on this building. It was a series of 12 bays, of storefront bays, and our intent is to restore that to how it originally looked. There's a central spine that leads up to the upstairs space. I assume that was for the fraternal lodges. So they poured a terrazzo floor. I imagine to have a very grand entrance, central spine entrance to a terrazzo staircase that leads to the upstairs. It should be beautiful once we get it restored and polished up. Terrazzo flooring is an expensive flooring option. It was utilized, I think, in the era to signify a very special location because it was a more expensive flooring option, and it's not utilized that much anymore. Our plan is to, we've already begun architecture work with Butcher Gardner Architects. Our plan is to start pre-leasing the building this summer. The intent is to do office tenant or tenants upstairs. And then downstairs we want to restore it to a series of small shops, 6 to 8 businesses, hopefully anchored by a restaurant or two, and then see if we can't cultivate some local retail and bring retail back to Main Street.